So I think now we will move on to hear from Raffael. So Raffael is CEO and co-founder of LegenDairy Foods, Europe's leading cultured dairy startup.
Thanks so much, Laura. Thanks so much. You're also sharing my presentation here. Second. There we go. Cool. Can everybody see that? Laura, can you see that?
Yeah, all good.
Amazing. So thanks so much for the invitation again, guys. And as Klein said before, it's super exciting really to be speaking with, the bunch of companies that are really leading kind of the whole cell egg space, and obviously also presenting after Klein is always super cool. I'm going to talk much more specifically about dairy, cheese in general. So I'm going to talk about the dairy revolution that LegenDairy is working on. We have limited times. I want to jump right in. Basically, the first thing I want to talk about specifically in the Western world, kind of the consumption or the demand for dairy products is just kind of limitless. So if you look, for example, in the EU specifically, we have 187 kilograms milk equivalents per capita per year consumed, which are enormous amounts, right? And the thing that we see right now is even in Asian countries, in developing nations now as well, is kind of the consumption of dairy products are increasing drastically. So for example, China, who is set up to triple its dairy consumption per capita in the next 5 years. So the question really is kind of, we have this massively scaled industry. And the question is, can we scale it even further when the demand is growing globally? Also, obviously, through, as Kreiner said before, a growing world population. The challenges that we have with dairy are obviously similar to that we have with meat. And I just want to highlight here a few ones that kind of didn't cover before. If you look at the dairy industry and how much greenhouse gas emissions that is, it's 4% of all man-made emissions today. That is more than aviation and shipping together. You might think 4%, that's not a lot. But when you put it into perspective, you see that obviously massive amounts of greenhouse gas emissions. The other thing is obviously on the animal side as well, is kind of, it's super inefficient. If you look at dairy cows today, they would usually live up to 20 years. But in the system where they're, where there's so much pressure to produce more and more every day, and where animals are bred to produce these amounts of milk every day, the average lifespan of dairy cows is really reduced to 4 to 5 years. And then after that, obviously, they're being kind of fed into the whole meat cycle. And Klein has already talked about how inefficient that is. At the very core, though, cows are actually, or we use cows in the dairy industries as kind of converting nutrients from condensed feed or from grass into milk ingredients, right? And the solution that we have at LegenDairy is basically, instead of domesticating cows, we are domesticating microbes to do the same thing much more efficiently. So where usually you would have to breed, millions of cows to kind of produce the amounts of dairy products that are being consumed every year, we basically engineer microorganisms that can do the same job in a bioreactor much more efficiently, much more sustainably, and also much more robust and reliable. How do we do this? So the first step is really to produce milk proteins, because milk proteins are the ingredients that you find in dairy products that really kind of make the difference between, animal-free plant-based solutions today and the real deal, which is obviously produced by cows. So what we want to have is casein and whey proteins, the two most abundant proteins that you find in milk, and those need to be bioidentical. As Klein said before as well, here you also can see kind of a detailed technical process, but really kind of trying to explain that on a high level in 6 easy steps. What we do at LegenDairy is basically we identify the genetic information on the genome of dairy cows that is responsible for the production of milk proteins. We replicate those sequences and we put those sequences into a host organism, so a microorganism that now basically has the same blueprint like a dairy cow to produce milk protein bioidentically. We then put this microorganism into a bioreactor, into a big fermenter, where we feed it carbohydrates and nitrogen so that the microorganisms grow. And alongside growing, they also always produce the milk protein. And that protein can then be purified and used in all kinds of dairy manufacturing processes and dairy applications. LegenDairy Foods specifically focuses on European cheese products, and I will talk in a second about why we focus on these products. But basically, the cool thing about this technology is that it sounds crazy to produce milk and dairy products without cows, but the idea or the logic behind it is actually not so new. So we already have a history of biotechnology replicating animals to produce desired compounds for humans. It started with insulin that was, initially sourced from the pancreas of pigs. In 1982, Genentech came up with a fermentation process to produce insulin through fermentation. And what you see today with insulin is that the majority of the insulin used today is produced through fermentation and doesn't come from the animals. Same thing for chymosin, which is an enzyme used in cheese production that originally was harvested from the stomach of calves. Nowadays, the majority of that enzyme is being produced through fermentation. But now with this new technology that LegenDairy is developing, for the first time, we can actually reach a price parity also with bulk ingredients. And that's the novelty about it. So for the first time, we can use fermentation to really produce big amounts of food. And since this technology has been around for quite some time, fermentation capacity is out there in the world today. The cool thing is that the scalability of this technology is really ready. So it's kind of like a low-hanging fruit because we have the capacity out there. There's big companies who can take our process that we developed on small scale and really produce these ingredients on really, really huge masses. So that we can actually very, very fast replace a big chunk of this dairy industry. The cool thing about fermentation is that one organism can produce all kinds of ingredients that you need for replicating dairy products. So you don't need different cell lines, so to speak, to basically disrupt the whole dairy aisle. You can do cheese, you can do yogurt, ice cream, and so forth. LegenDairy starting with cheese, as I said, though, because we believe that here it's really the nexus of market pull and technology push. What do I mean by that? The biggest consumer pain point today, specifically for flexitarians who want to get rid of animal-based products, is cheese, because plant-based products are not performing well because, again, they're lacking the functionality of the milk proteins. At the same time, though, we found a process to actually shorten the way to cheese. Usually you start with raw milk that you acidify, you add rennet, so the milk coagulates, and then the cheese curd is formed, and then you need to ripen this product if you want to go for a ripened product. What we found, since we don't start with the raw milk, is that we can get to the end product faster than the traditional industry. So not only are we kind of targeting the biggest consumer pain point, we're also getting there much faster than the incumbent industry, which obviously, again, drives down the price of the product. The other thing I have to say as well is that I'm Swiss, and as you can see, I'm not only a big fan of the Swiss Alps and dairy cows, but I'm also a big fan of cheese. So obviously, also there is some passion about this amazing product, and that is really shared among the whole team here at LegenDairy Foods. We've done the first global consumer survey on this as well, and what we found is that surprisingly great support, even among consumer groups that we would have thought are a bit more critical about technology in food. But actually, what we found is that more than 70% of consumers are actually willing to buy these products, and that is before these products have hit the shelves. And usually, what you find with new technology and with new products is that once people can actually buy it, consumer acceptance even increases much more. Quick sneak peek into our team and who's working here at LegenDairy alongside myself. So we've really assembled a very cross-functional team, people from molecular biology working on these organisms, people from the dairy industry, so from the big dairy corporates working on the application, but also bioprocess engineers who scale this process together with us. And this way we really feel well equipped to kind of solve this very challenging technological challenge. What's up next? Taste testing here in Berlin with an invite-only event of 30 people, among them obviously our investors, Jeremy and Jim. It's going to be super exciting to have them here, where we work together with a German Michelin star chef to produce all kinds of great products out of ricotta and mozzarella. Want to end with this one. What is the long-term vision of LegenDairy by 2030? We want to replace 10% of Europe's dairy to really show that this technology, has the potential to become a system game changer in the long run. Cool. Laura, let's jump into Q&A.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Raphael. It was really great. So we do have some questions. First one, how confident are you that your cheeses will satisfy people who really like cheese, genuine cheese, as opposed to mass catering sector? So I guess, yeah, premium cheese compared to mass market cheese that you might have on a pizza.
Yeah, very confident. This is exactly the segment we're going for. I think this is not designed for, let's say, mass market only, or let's say, people who already switched and are on a plant-based diet, but we really develop products for the cheese lovers, right? And also, if you look, for example, into our consumer survey, it's really interesting that actually the most positive correlation attribute that we found was people who today consume a lot of cheese are actually more likely to want to buy our product. And this is also how we design it. So I'm fairly confident when I look at taste and texture, what we've been able to achieve, that we're able to really satisfy the taste of these people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and a short one now. Will your cheese contain cholesterol?
No, it won't. I think this is the beauty of the process, is that we can really design it and define the types of ingredients that we want to put into it. So no cholesterol, no lactose, really kind of optimizing the health profile of the product.
Mm-hmm. And this one is from Josh. So how does your process compare to Perfect Days?
Right. So I guess underlying, blueprint of this whole industry, whether you look at Perfect Day or all of the other precision fermentation companies, it's kind of the same idea, using microorganisms to produce, animal sourced ingredients. So kind of the underlying idea behind, I think, is the same. I think we focus much more, obviously, on the cheese relevant ingredients, so casein, for example, and also much more on the application side compared to most of our competitors. Because what we believe in the long run is actually, of course, you have to produce these ingredients through microbial fermentation, and there's a difference between the organisms that you use. But at the end of the day, consumers will tell, right? And you want to produce a great product, and that's what consumers will care about. So we focus a lot on really nailing the taste and the texture of the product.
Yeah. And so you talked a bit about incorporating plant-based fats with your casein and whey proteins. Are there any limitations of using plant-based fat? Could you use animal-based fat from fermentation in the future?
Definitely. I think this is where everything is going towards. Ultimately, depends on the application itself, but there's a bunch of options to introduce animal fats that are being produced through fermentation. I guess limiting factors today, obviously, sometimes the attributes of the fat that you want to use, we want to use local healthy fats, right? And some of these fats obviously are compared, for example, to the usual suspects that you see in the plant-based products that are stable at room temperature. There's a bigger challenges for some of these locally sourced oils that you want to use. So that's definitely another tech development that is happening at the moment.
Great. And this one is from Max. If you can share, what will your initial sales model look like? Would you go for a direct to consumer model or B2B?
So we really believe in kind of the wow effect of this product, which is why we want to be, as close to the end consumer as possible. Initially, probably through gastro, but at the end of the day, we want to be there when the products sell. So we don't want to work exclusively B2B. We really work product centered with a big passion for the product. This is what really drives us here. So that is really the approach we're going for.
Great. And this one from Suzanne. Do you know what the energy footprint could look like at scale up? So I guess a full scale facility, what would the energy requirements be?
Yeah, great question as well. There are really early life cycle assessments on this. And again, kind of similar to what Kreiner said, at industrial scale up to 95% more efficient, I guess. I think really what the underlying metric here is that you're looking at kind of nutrient conversion efficiency. And depending on the source that you look at, cows, for example, have a conversion efficiency of 4 to 13%, whereas fermentation is 40 to 80%. So already, like, best case, you really are 20 to 25% more efficient than cows with this.
And last one from Stephanie, will you be able to produce mozzarella that actually melts?
For sure. I think specifically with mozzarella, you know, the meltability comes down to the casein structure that you have in the normal mozzarella. We are producing bioidentical caseins. So when we include those in the product, this is also the functionality that you get that you sometimes obviously with plant-based products cannot achieve. So this is really kind of the game changer that we obviously have set out to solve as well.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks so much, Raffael.